Oh, if there is something indeed after all of this, what will we flawed human beings give to get to the other side?
Now, my grandmother was a wonderful person. She taught me how to play the game Monopoly. She understood that the name of the game is to acquire. She would accumulate everything she could, and eventually she became the master of the board. And eventually, every time, she would take my last dollar, and I would quit in utter defeat. And then she would always say the same thing to me. She'd look at me and she'd say, "One day, you'll learn to play the game." One summer, I played Monopoly with a neighbor almost every day, all day long. We'd play Monopoly for hours. And that summer, I learned to play the game. I came to understand the only way to win is to make a total commitment to acquisition. I came to understand that money and possessions, that's the way that you keep score. And by the end of that summer, I was more ruthless than my grandmother. I was ready to bend the rules if I had to win that game. And I sat down with her to play that fall. I took everything she had. I destroyed her financially and psychologically. I watched her give her last dollar and quit in utter defeat. And then she had one more thing to teach me. Then she said, "Now it all goes back in the box." All those houses and hotels, all the railroads and utility companies, all that property, and all that wonderful money. Now it all goes back in the box. I didn't want it to go back in the box. No, she said. None of it was really yours. You got all heated up about it for a while. But it was around a long time before you sat down at the board. And it will be here after you're gone. Players come and players go. But it all goes back in the box. Houses and cars, titles and clothes, filled barns, bulging portfolios, even your body. Because the fact is that everything I clutch and consume and hoard is going to go back in the box, and I'm going to lose it all. That's not much of an ROI on that. You have to ask yourself, when you finally get the ultimate promotion, when you've made the ultimate purchase, when you buy the ultimate home, when you have stored up financial security and climbed the ladder of success to the highest rung you can possibly climb it, and the thrill wears off, and it will wear off, then what? How far do you have to walk down that road before you see where it leads? Surely you understand, it'll never be enough. So you have to ask yourself the question, what matters?
Hi there, on behalf of SDBullion.com, this is James Anderson with your SD Bullion Market Update. Before jumping into various topics this week, do me a favor, smash the like button here. Please share this content with those you think might also enjoy it. An eventful and tumultuous week in the precious metals complex. The gold-silver ratio took a sharp plunge intra-week, piercing the near 63 for the low. How long might we have to wait to see it in the 50s? Following up on some conflation and loose ends from last week's Wall Street Bet story, a separate offshoot of mostly young silver enthusiasts who have a fast-growing subreddit called Wall Street Silver, I had the privilege of being their forum's first guest at their Ask Me Anything interview this past week. Here's my opinion on what occurred between the Wall Street Bets crowd and the mainstream media claiming that they were also getting into silver. All right, so let's move on to the Wall Street Bets and the Wall Street Silver and that absolute crazy fiasco. I mean, that was incredible. I started like voyeuring that like a few months back, and I used to see it, before then, and I'd see it on Twitter, but I never really got too much into it. But then when I went to Reddit and started voyeuring, oh my gosh, it was pretty amazing. I actually got to say, I kind of like those guys. I think they're pretty hilarious. They're self-deprecating. They don't take themselves too seriously. And, other crowds are maybe do take themselves a little bit too seriously. And I really appreciate that about those dudes. They're young guys, they're very, they're very focused on what they were doing. And I understand why they were pissed. What happened, obviously, was they were focused on what they were doing. And then people saw how successful they were. And they were like, well, let's try and do it for something else. And so they posted a couple things about silver, and they got around on Twitter and Facebook and Reddit. And so people really got excited in our industry. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of clear blue sky, it starts pounding down. Like financial media is giving us, interviews and stuff on Bloomberg TV, on CNBC, this doesn't happen. You got to pay for those interviews. It used to be, now they're just giving you prime time viewers. And it just started feeding frenzy and so that's why the volumes are so amazing. It was not just that we had all these, veteran buyers who knew whoa, now's the time, we got to get in this. But it was also all these new people coming in too. So tremendous volume. And it was just the last, 5-6 days, they've been a blur. They've been really, really exciting. So I understand the angst, the anger about that. It wasn't, I think it's just a strange thing. It was somebody just threw a Molotov cocktail and it worked, throw silver in there. And then all of a sudden the financial media ran with it. It's okay, I guess that's where we're at. And oh, by the way, while it's happening, 1.5 billion notional just inflows into SLV quietly. Okay, what? I mean, it's just insane, right? And that was just on one day. There was a couple other days where there was 30 million chunks, 20 million chunks, and the 1.5 is a 60. So you can see here how dwarfed the 1980 Hunt Brothers and late 1996 Warren Buffett Berkshire silver bet versus the new gigantic well entrant is. When we add up all the capital flows into silver ETFs and media reported bullion sales figures this past weeks, it's pretty safe to conservatively say that over 300 million equivalent ounces of silver bets have been placed in the first 5 weeks of this year, 2021. That's over half of all last year's demand, according to 2020 Silver Institute estimates. All of these silver bullion bets and bullion purchases are happening in just over a month of time. As for the disappointment of not seeing silver spot last beyond 30 this week, here's a look at how delayed silver spot rising can be after large capital inflows into the SLV. How long do you think it's going to take for the blue line to catch the black and pass it, similar to what happened in 2011? Great news. We have more quality social media meme makers with the arrival of Wall Street silver crowd. Let's look again at the size on the cash flow that went into SLV based on how much that would be in physical silver. This graphic done by, you can see the handle ATrucasLT. Someone on Twitter made this graphic. The graphic illustrates just how ridiculous of a theoretical bullion inflow the recent SLV bets would equate to. He writes, Buyer's Guide to SLV, iShares Silver Trust, also known as how to spend currency on digital IOUs for silver that doesn't exist. So you can see the truck. It says max load 25 tons. SLV added 3,415 tons of physical silver bars to the Park Royal vault in 4 days. The question, did they source, move, and catalog 11,500 cubic feet of 0.9999 silver bricks? And was over 10% of the entire LBMA or 35% of global annual supply just sitting there, waiting for a buyer? Answer. The silver was created out of thin air using questionable legal accounting. It really doesn't exist except on paper. He writes, at best, the silver was likely leased from multiple parties. Added that SLV books his new supply, wrapped in 22 layers of derivatives and turned into 3 billion plus ounces of shorts thrown at the market these past few days. Think that's bad? This price manipulation has been going on like this for decades, where each ounce of physical 0.99 silver in existence, anywhere from 400 to 250 ounces of paper silver have been printed into existence using these methods. It's time to end the scam. Exclamation point, pound, silver squeeze, pound, break the comics. So the young are out there and they are educating the masses by painting social media with such documents. My industry colleague and friend and author of the book called The Big Silver Short, How the Wall Street Banks Have Left the Silver Market in Place for the Short Squeeze of a Lifetime, sent over what he was told was the last audit of the SLV's 3 vault locations two of which are over in London and one of which is over in New York. All the figures on paper track the chart that I showed you earlier, but let's dig a little bit further into SLV's prospectus to give you a slice of an idea of the legal loopholes and language used for this trust. First thing to note about the SLV is that alleged RICO criminal JP Morgan is the loan overseer. They are the custodian of the iShares SLV trust. Someone who's a big skeptic of the SLV is longtime industry expert James Turk. He writes, I gather from what I've been reading that traders are focusing on SLV, the silver ETF. However, I personally do not own SLV and would recommend staying away from it. If you want to own an ETF as close as possible to physical silver, SLV's prospectus says the assets of the trust consist primarily of silver, but primarily does not mean 100%. Also, SLV's 10Q says it owns, quote, investment in silver, quote, instead of just saying, quote, silver. By saying investment, a lot of possibilities are open, including paper silver, which is not a tangible asset. In contrast, if you read the annual report of PSLV, it says it owns physical silver bullion. So it makes more sense to buy PSLV if you want to buy silver through an ETF. James Turk writes, the custodian for the largest silver ETF, the iShares Silver Trust, or SLV, is JP Morgan, as I mentioned. For a long time, the fund's prospectus included a note explaining that if its holdings increased above 500 million ounces, it would seek an additional custodian. But in July, I would assume that's 2020 of July, as SLV's holdings soared above that level, the clause was quietly dropped. Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently sitting just over that important 26 fiat Fed note per troy ounce level. That's the same level we were at when we rocketed off from late January 2011, and the spot price of silver nearly doubled within 90 days. Now, if you have any friends or colleagues who are perhaps using the SLV for any type of trading activity, you might want to consider alerting them to some of the allegations that are being thrown the trust's way, and you want to perhaps consider moving into safer places. But hurry. We are, after all, sitting on over 2 times the fiat M2 rocket fuel versus the last early 2011 run, and we got more trillions coming in terms of stimulus, etc. Do not get left behind holding an unsecured derivative bag as silver gets running to the upside. That's it for this evening. All of you out there, thanks for tuning in, and as always, take great care of yourselves and those you love. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to give our video a thumbs up. To keep getting bullion-related news and industry insights, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Finally, hit that alert button so you know when we publish fresh content. Give us your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what you think and which topics you want to hear more about.